So we're continuing the talks on attachment and how to deal with them with various antidotes. And I volunteered to do the one on sexual attachment. So I'd just like to clarify something, that this is not one that I'm currently struggling with. As in some cases we're picking the ones that we're struggling with. But I know that this is going to come up because I'm a human being. And when I started reading more about this and the antidotes, I'm so glad I'm doing this talk, because I've learned so much in doing this, and I see that the potential for becoming sexually attracted to someone is so huge. It's huge. And it hasn't happened yet since I've been in ropes. I'm so happy about that. But I also want to be ready. And so throughout the talk, I'm going to be comparing sexual attachment to running a chainsaw, which is something else I am familiar with, and I'm practicing awareness about that, and the two are very similar. So I think the fact that we're in the desire realm is our first big clue. Desire realm. Hello, we're in the desire realm, and we're operating with these sense organs. And what I didn't know, I'm so naive about certain things, and ignorant too, but I read in one of Venerable's talks that sexual attachment is the biggest attachment. And I actually didn't know that. I thought perhaps, money, people chasing reputation, people searching for power. But no, apparently it's sexual attachment. So that also explains why there's so many antidotes. There's just reams of antidotes. And the reason for that is that we pick the ones that work, because we're all so different. So it's not just physical sexual attachment that we have to watch out for. It's also emotional. And this is the one where I could be very sneaky and just say, no, there's nothing going wrong. There's nothing going on. It's just we're friends, and we just like to hang out with each other. When in fact, emotional attachment is just spreading the roots in my mind. So that's the one to watch for. And we also, this is not a talk just for monastics. It's a talk for everyone, because for our entire life we're interacting with people. And some people happen to be monastics that we interact with. Some people are in committed relationships. And some people, it's just best to honor where they're at. And so it's something that we have to watch for all the time. And I think the one question that I never asked myself when I was younger and wanting a relationship was, would this be good for the other person? That never occurred to me, because of course I assumed with my ego that I would be the perfect solution for someone else. So that question is also a good one to have in mind. So let's see. I think to set the backdrop for this, it's really good to review what it is that sets us up to even begin to notice someone. And so the teachings on the Lamrim identifies 6 factors that set us up to be attached in any kind of category. So I'm going to look at the 6 with the focus on a sexual interest. So the first one is the dependent basis. And this is that the seed of attachment exists in our mind stream. So since beginningless time, we've been planting these seeds of being attracted to others. And until we're on the path of seeing, those seeds are going to just be present. Now, I don't know about you, but the path of seeing for me is a very long way off. So for me to even think that just because I'm in robes and I've taken these precepts that I'm now immune is crazy thinking. Or even for someone to say, I'm married, or I'm in a committed relationship, this is not a problem. That's crazy thinking, because causes and conditions come together, and kaboomo, there is a person who we're already sort of starting to notice in very great detail. So I think it's very important to know this first part, that it's just being in cyclic existence with these seeds in our mind stream. The conditions are there waiting to ripen. And that's really what keeps me at least honest with myself. And also, I've heard so many stories about, first of all, monastics disrobing, principally because they're attracted to someone. We see the divorce rate, it's at least 50% or higher of people who get married. You know, there's just so many examples of people who get waylaid with this one. Okay, so the second one is the object. So obviously, for us to become interested in someone, there has to be an object. And in my way of thinking, there are certain people who are my type and certain people who aren't my type. So I think just knowing that, just knowing who we're potentially attracted to. So, for example, two beings walk into the Abbey. Okay, so this is meant to be a joke, but you'll get the point. So one person comes along, and I notice them, but they're not my type. Just say hello. Another person comes along. Oh, you know, they're rather, this one's soft, and this one seems to understand me. And this one could potentially help me in any situation. And this one is missing an arm, so they understand suffering. And you know, the story starts going where this person could really be the one. Now, I know that Venerable Children has taught that there is no one, but you know what? There are exceptions to rules in my mind. This person is the one. And so the thing to do is when we notice that someone is the one, then we have to respectfully create distance from the object of our attraction. So that isn't to put them in the enemy camp. That isn't to just sort of be a freak out person. Just every time the person comes along, it's like, oh, you know, and you don't talk to them, and it's like you run away. But you just have to admit to yourself that, you know, that person is attractive, and I just have to do the respectful distance thing. And quite possibly, if the attraction is really strong, like you just don't go near the person for a while you're sorting the things out. Okay. Then the next one is detrimental friends, sometimes called wrong friends. So this might be the kind of person where if we're monastics, the person might say, oh, you monastics, you know, you can't handle relationships. That's why you're doing this trip. You know, you're really missing out on life. And they give you all the reasons why you're missing out on life. It's probably not a good idea to spend a lot of time with that kind of person. Or if you're, you know, a lay person, there's also people who will say, well, don't worry, if you're attracted to that person, I know you're married, but you know what, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Go for it, you might learn something. And I've heard people say that to me in the past when they've been defending their own breaches of, you know, promises to others or their marriage commitments. So again, that kind of person is not the kind of person that you want to hang around with to build your ethical strength. Then the next one is, it's called verbal stimuli, which basically refers to the media. So every time we go into town, I'm blown away at what is simply on billboards. You know, people almost naked are on billboards. And, you know, when I open even magazines, there are Buddhist magazines. There's couples embracing. There are people with not much on again. And so this kind of thing, you know, when I go home to visit my parents and I sit with my mom to watch TV, the amount of stimuli that is just showing, you know, sexuality is simply, we're bombarded by these messages that we need to be in a couple relationship, that as Venerable Jigme was saying yesterday, the focus on the body is just huge. And heaven forbid that this body age. Anyway, that's a whole other talk. So just being aware that our interaction with the media is another stimulus. Then the next one is habit. Well, this sort of ties into what I mentioned earlier. We're in a world where couple relationships is the norm. So whether we're lay people or monastics, we're all expected, you know, as we grow up in our families, to get into a relationship, have children, and do all of that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it can get our mind going crazy if there's something else we want to do, like really explore a spiritual life. So I think we have to really notice what our habits are in being raised, and to notice that these habits are the places that have planted seeds, and to know that, you know, there again, I have these tendencies, I've got to watch out for it. Then the last one is my favorite, and it's a fantastic label. It's the one of inappropriate attention. And so this is again the one that sees the object, you know, you're the one. And our mind starts writing the script about how we're going to be happy ever after, forever. This person is going to love me forever, even when I'm in a wretched mood. And this person is going to be there to know what I need in every moment. And you know, the script just gets written. And the inappropriate attention one, we're always sort of noticing the person that we should be distancing ourselves from, if it's not the right time, according to where we're at in our life. So there's many antidotes, as I mentioned. That's sort of the background. And I'm going to read through them quickly, and there's a lot of places where you can find these antidotes if you've missed it. You can go on the tuptenchildren.org website and find these. You can also go on the monastic section of the website, even if you're not a monastic, because these points are just so helpful. So the first one, to counter noticing someone's body and thinking it is absolutely gorgeous, is to then start looking deeply and to think and meditate on what's beneath the skin. And there's wonderful meditations we can do about what is underneath the skin. And if you're not familiar with that, you can get books from the library. We have this one here at the Abbey, and any anatomy books you can get. And the one that particularly grossed me out this morning is the one showing the abdomen. And there's one showing the lungs. I won't show you right now. It's really gross. And so the more grossed out I am, the more I can counter the fact that I see a body, it's gorgeous, but you know what? Underneath, what's the reality? And so to really look at the body and look at the parts and see what's there. I had a very interesting experience one day here at the Abbey about 1.5 years ago. Somebody had something go in their eye. They were out in the forest. So I was in the kitchen just looking at this person open up their eye. And I almost screamed because for a moment I saw the eyeball. And I thought, you know, sometimes we'll say, oh, I'm in love with this person because of their eyes. Well, you know, if we could take the person apart and just look at their eyeball, it's a rather frightening thing. So you might take things around the house that look like body parts and then just look at it and say, is this really what I could fall in love with? Well, when I saw this person's eyeball exposed, I was just like, ah! And I thought, wow, that is really scary. So you might do that for yourself. That's helpful. Okay, so to counter loneliness, because I think this is where it starts for anybody. So we start feeling lonely. If we're a spiritual practitioner, we've dropped our refuge of going to the teachings and going to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha as our refuge. And we're now looking outwards for that source that is going to fill the gap in our heart that is feeling this loneliness. And I would say that when that comes up in my mind, that's a huge flag. That's probably the flag. Because when I'm not lonely, you know, the thoughts of looking at the potential object is just simply not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But the loneliness factor is the thing that's going to make me look outwards. And so one thing to do there is to, you know, go back to, if I go back in my experience of being madly in love and then seeing how it played out, the person, I couldn't bring him happiness, he couldn't bring me happiness. In fact, we brought each other more suffering. It's just reality. And so I'm not going to talk about other relationships that obviously work. There's many. But in my experience, this kind of reasoning really helps me when the loneliness factor sets in and I need someone to cure this ache. And then, as I mentioned, the habit thing, realizing we're in a society that expects people to be in couples. That's a societal expectation. And just to know, you know, we're going to get a lot of feedback that is not going to help us in our spiritual quest for, you know, going towards full awakening. And then another thing to think about is to think about the complexities of a relationship if we start looking at someone like, oh, you are the one. And to think about what this brings. Well, it brings quarrels. It brings jealousy. It brings protecting my turf. It brings all these kinds of things that, are such negative ways of thinking. And then what we do to protect our turf, that special person. And then there's a teaching on the Fore Distortions. And one of the distortions is seeing the body as pure, when in fact it isn't pure at all. And then Venerable Children and all of our teachers get very graphic with this one. So we have to think of the body as, in reality, it's a factory that produces pee and poo, really. And so when you think of it as being a factory that produces those substances, it helps us get real. And then in addition to those, there's mucus, there's perspiration, some people call it sweat, there's, you name it, what's produced by the body, and that helps us, that helps me get real about what the body is. And then there's other things that are mentioned. For example, some people are really freaked out when they see a skeleton. Well, if we're freaked out by seeing a skeleton, the question our teachers ask is, why aren't we freaked out when we see a walking skeleton? So when we see someone walking by, why don't we just try and imagine, use our X-ray vision and see, here's a skeleton, a living skeleton walking by. As I said, not all of these antidotes work for all people. Pick the ones that do work. Then another one that's quite graphic is imagine the person dead and they're being eaten by vultures. That's quite a graphic one for my mind. Then I don't think I'd have the desire to pick up that person and hold them. And then if we are in this feeling of wanting to hold people, Venerable Children says, then why not hold a pillow? It's soft. That one actually doesn't work for me. So I have to go to these other more graphic ones. Or we'll say, I used to say, I'm in love with that person's mind. Well, we now have been through the teachings of trying to find the mind, trying to find our own mind, trying to find the mind of someone else. Can't find it, let alone touch it. So I think with all of these things, I think if we really notice what's going on and to be ready. So what I really appreciate about getting ready for this talk is I realize I'm not so ready. I haven't been so practiced. When I go out in the forest with the chainsaw, every minute that I'm holding that chainsaw and it's running, I know there's a huge potential of me cutting off my leg, and really, there's a potential of dying. Or if I cut the tree wrong, there's one thing called widowmaker, which scares the heck out of me. And if the tree snaps in a certain way, the tree whips around and, well, you can be cut in half. If I have that same kind of awareness when I'm around people that trigger my sexual attachment, if I'm practiced, I'm going to put these antidotes into place. If I'm not practiced, if I don't know what's going on in my mind, I'm going to go down a road that's very, very slippery, and the slope is very steep, and I'll be in trouble in no time, monastic or not. And so if we're a monastic, of course, if we engage in that kind of behavior, not only are we risking losing our, monastic vows, but we're also really damaging other people's value in the triple gem, which is what we represent. And if we're a lay person, we've seen the disasters that this kind of behavior brings. It ruins families, it ruins friendships. It's just very, very damaging. So let's be on the lookout for this kind of thing when it arises, and let's be ready in advance for this so that we can deal with it swiftly and carefully.